where's the hat? Where are our hashtags? I'm just kind of here to get the ball rolling. Those of you who don't know me, Bill Chapman, professor of motion media, film, digital media, television, who knows what next week, here at SCAD. So this is a little more of an intimate workshop versus this morning's panel. Feel free to open up questions, get a discussion going, et cetera, et cetera. We'll just kind of kick it off and then go from there. I've asked Frank Radice, Linda Ong to each give you like a 2-minute synopsis of what they're involved in, not only in the digital media side, but things that closely relate to it, so we can kind of explore different avenues in the business, in the space, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I'll just kind of lead it off. Ladies first.
Well, I was going to say age before beauty.
I was going to say ladies first, but I'll take it.
I'm going to stay out of that one, okay?
Thank you. So, I thought it would be interesting, since a lot of you were in the earlier one, to say a little bit, for us to say a little bit about some of the other stuff that we do, some of the things that we've done in our careers. So, I started my professional career in 1970, but I didn't really get my first real job until '72, and I was a film editor at a local TV station in Washington, D.C. on the night the Saturday Night Massacre occurred, which was during Watergate, when everyone at the White House got fired. It was a weekend. Nobody works in a local TV station on the weekend, except for the lowest of the low. There was no one there when that story broke. Me and another lowly guy got it on the air, and a week later I was working at ABC, where I spent the next 17 years. And during that time at ABC, I was a writer, producer, a director, an executive producer, and a vice president. So I had managed to do a little bit of everything. This gets me to a point that I want to make, that I've said and always say to all the students I ever talk to. What I did in my career was something that doesn't really happen a lot today. People make quantum leaps today. They go from being a college student to being a producer. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that in our business, whether it's digital or linear, that to learn all the jobs you can, so that anyone that you work with cannot say to you, you haven't done this, so why should I listen to you? It's to learn the jobs in a ladder. By the way, if you're lucky enough to become a producer the day you walk out of college, don't say no, but make sure that you learn all the jobs that happen during that period of time. So moving on, so that was a very spectacular moment in my career. Watergate made a big difference. The next time something like that happened to me was in 1979, when the hostages were taken in Iran. And I was working on the assignment desk, again on the weekend, again where the lowliest people work. And I had to call this lowly reporter named Ted Koppel to come to work on a Sunday because they'd taken hostages in Iran. His answer to me was, well, Frankie, it'll be over in a couple of hours, just like it was the last time. But I'll come in if you make me. I made him. That became Nightline. I became a producer on that show, and then spent the next 3 or 4 years doing that. And that was a very important moment. It's really lucky. Take advantage of those great moments when you can. If a great moment happens, grab a hold of it and do everything you can to move forward. So I worked as a producer. I went to the Middle East and covered the wars in the Middle East. Got shot at, unlike Brian Williams. I covered the wars in Central America, so I was in Nicaragua and El Salvador and Honduras in the 80s. So 1980 was the El Salvadorian elections and there were wars, and in 81 there was the Nicaraguan, 79 there was the Nicaraguan coup, 80 was El Salvador, 81 was Beirut. So I spent the next few years traveling around the world as a war correspondent and a war producer. I then became tired of getting shot at, went to work as a director for Entertainment Tonight, did that for 1 year, and became the producer of Showbiz Today on CNN, which was the first live entertainment news show on television, hosted by Mr. Bill Tush, who is back there right now. Please stand up and say hello, Bill. So, Bill, I
have a shrine of Frank in my home.
I have a shrine of Bill in my home. That was just a really wonderful time, because we were the first people to really see that entertainment news was something that people wanted to consume. There was no internet. And so it was our show is where they went. If they went to Entertainment Tonight, they went and they saw it glossier with, I don't want to say prettier people, but they did it glossier. And so you got two different kinds of things. We were a news show because we were on CNN. We still did entertainment, but it was with a news angle. And so that was a really great thing, and that lasted for quite a while for me until I got an opportunity to go to NBC, where I had switched over from being a producer to being a marketing guy. And then I spent the next 16 years in marketing at NBC, where I started out as a director and ended up as an executive vice president. And at that point, after 6 years of being an EVP, I left NBC and started my own consulting firm, and that's me. So, Linda.
I can't talk
Oh,
that.
wait a minute. I was the president of the Emmys. I forgot about that. But that happened to be news, sports, and documentaries and daytime. So there's two Emmys. There's a West Coast Emmy, which is prime time, and there's an East Coast
Like
Emmy.
the rap wars.
Exactly. It's exactly what it was like. And there's East Coast Emmys, news, daytime, and sports. I'm wondering how the news Emmy people are going to deal with this, by the way. And so that's my career in a nutshell.
Thank you. Well, my experience is not half as exotic as yours, or traversing as many counties. I'm just curious, how many of you were in the last session? Raise your hand. Okay. So some of it may be revisiting. So I've been in the television business for, I don't know, over 20-something years, far longer than I like to count. And I started, actually, I majored in advertising at the University of Texas in Austin. And it was mostly because, actually, I always wanted to write, and my tiger mom said I couldn't be an English major because I wouldn't get a job. So she said, get a marketable skill, and this is one of those situations where mom was right. And so I went into advertising because I figured that I would be able to use my follow my creative passions, but make money. So in the advertising program at UT, which at the time, and it's totally random, I had no idea, it was the #1 thing, #1 program in the country at the time. I went to UT because my boyfriend went there, but full admission. But it was awesome. And the first day of the creative class, I had a really great curriculum of both left brain and right brain. And the first day of the creative class, they said, well, you have to choose, do you want to be an art director or a copywriter? And because I'd always self-identified as a writer, of course, that would have been the natural path to go, but I actually said, well, I don't really know what art direction's about. I don't know if I'd be any good at it. And so let me study that. And that is, you're going to hear a theme as I go through my career in 2 minutes, which is always be open to the areas of inquiry that you don't know, because it just makes you more versatile, to your point. Because if I'd gone down the copywriting path, I might have been an awesome, maybe the best copywriter ever. But I became more versatile because I became a creative director later in my career, and I could equally be as impactful in talking to people about the design of something as I could about the voice and the vocabulary. And to this day, I still deal with both things with our clients. So the fast forward version of the story is, I graduated, I got a job in advertising, and after a year I said, this is the worst profession I've ever been in or experienced, and advertising sucks the soul out of people's lives. I'm sorry if any of you are advertising majors. It really was that if you're a creative, the ad agency model has, it's a certain beast for creatives, and you either like that beast or you don't. I found that it was not an inspiring place to be. So I left there, and I'd had a lifelong passion for fashion and television, and I had been in touch through someone I met in college in a forum similar to this that I stayed in touch with, and I got a job at a company called Video Fashion, which was one of the first of its type to runway shows, shooting runway shows, Milan, London, Paris, New York, interviews with designers. I got to interview Naomi Campbell before she'd ever thrown a phone at anybody. So it was behind the scenes, and I really learned production from that. And I could have been a television major in college, but I wasn't. But I studied thinking, and then I learned how to create. So I learned how to edit, I learned how to produce, I learned how to write a story. So I essentially became a segment producer. And then my next job, I went to Lifetime Television as an on-air writer-producer in the promos department. And I don't know how much you guys know about what promos are versus advertising, but I didn't know because in advertising it was just advertising. I didn't even know there was an industry called promos. To me, it was the same thing. It's just making ads for the channel. So I went there, and within a year and a half, I was running the department. Not because I wanted to, but because my skill set made me more valuable in the company because everybody else there knew how to cut spots, they knew how to produce, they knew how to edit, they knew how time code worked, but they had not been trained in how to think. And that's why I really feel it's so important that no matter what your passion is, learn the other side of it because you will be more valuable and you will gain more understanding and more expertise. And then I left Lifetime to work at an entertainment brand agency, which is where I met Frank and where we launched MSNBC, and also while there I launched the Sundance Channel, and a lot of, it was an agency that really just served the television industry, and so we did promos, we did sales tapes, eventually we did design, and then eventually we started creating a brand strategy practice. So at the time, we were working with a lot of networks who, at that time, networks weren't using brand as a centralized, organized.
To be fair, they didn't need to.
Tool, right? They didn't need to. So they were just discovering the power of brand as an organizing tool and as a promise for the viewers. So we really kind of, I left there as managing director of brand strategy and really were one of the teams that kind of pushed that forward in the television world. And I only left there, I left what I was doing, but I left there because Oprah Winfrey and Geraldine Laybourne, who was the founder of Nickelodeon, were starting a new network called Oxygen, which was not the Oxygen that it's not the Bad Girls Club Oxygen of today, but it was, at the time, it was actually 180. It was supposed to be like female empowerment network. And at the time, it was before broadband, but it was a second convergence play because MSNBC was the first, and then Oxygen was all about web and television, only unfortunately it was still a dial-up world, so it was a little bit ahead of its time. But again,
Trying to download video on a 24 baud
it's
modem,
not good.
not easy.
It's not good. So what was interesting to me about that opportunity is to run a marketing department and to create a brand from scratch, which I had not, I'd done on the vendor side, but not on the network side. So again, always opted for the place where I didn't have experience, where it was a little scary, but kind of good scary. And to me, what I've learned throughout the years is that when you take those choices, those are the places where you're going to learn. When you get that, like, oh my God, I'm kind of scared because I don't know what it is, but it's exciting, those are the opportunities you should take. The ones that are scary, I have a fairy godmother, and I guarantee, you know, if you ever have a fairy, or get the opportunity to have a fairy godmother in your life or godfather, take it. It's essentially a mentor. And she always said to me, always make a decision out of hope, don't make a decision out of fear. And I use that as a personal and professional mantra to this day, and it has really served me very well. And so the hope was that maybe I could do this job, I could launch a network, and maybe some great stuff would happen. After we launched, for a lot of reasons, I decided that wasn't the path I wanted to take, and I decided to just take I had a gap year or whatever, take a breather. But then my passion was, I knew I wanted to work. I knew I didn't want to work in a big company. And so I just said, well, I like brands. I love brands. I love brand strategy. What can I do with this? And I just started consulting. And, you know, as Frank mentioned in the last session, probably the things I've been most proud of in the past 15 years since I've been on my own, and now the company's growing. It took me 8 years to hire somebody because I was scared. But, you know, got to work on the relaunch of Bravo, got to work on the relaunch of History and Animal Planet and BET and a lot of other really cool brands that some of them are directly in the media and entertainment space, some are a little outside. Got to work with Gilt and Etsy and some really cool brands. And all of that, I would say the first 14 years of the business was all referral. We did no marketing and no sales. And it just grew and grew and grew. And I think I fundamentally believe it's because I followed something that I was really passionate about, that I never stopped learning. I always took those jobs where it made me a little scared, but good, excited, scared. And I always, you know, decided things out of hope. I never took a job after a certain point, maybe in the beginning I did, but now if someone, you know, I think sometimes when you graduate, you may be navigating hopefully you'll be navigating multiple job opportunities. Sometimes you get to places in your life where you're like, well, I should do this because if I don't do it, I'll be sorry. So don't make that decision. Make the decision like, I'm gonna do this because I think I could be awesome. If this works, it'll be awesome. don't make the other decision, which is like you're afraid you're going to miss out on something, because that, I think, ultimately will not carry you down your passion. And the things where you think you can be great, that's been my whole business philosophy, and that's why we grow, because every time, we were talking about it, every time the business gets boring, it gets interesting again. And some of that is the culture and the changes in the landscape, but some of it is on you. And that's whether you're in a staff job or on your own. You got to keep it interesting for yourself, so you got to keep learning.
It's funny, you know, the success I think that both of us have had, and it's a lesson I think that everyone can learn, has a lot also to do with the way we curate our own brand.
Mm-hmm.
That is to say, the continual conversations that we have with our friends and contacts. That is to create relationships that can last a long time, especially if you're creating relationships that are somehow either in or tangential to the business that you're going in. That doesn't necessarily mean that because you are in the television business that you shouldn't talk to somebody in the leisure business, because the two do combine. I mean, leisure business is probably not the right one. That should hospitality. It also may be, here, I've got a friend in the sneaker business. What does that have to do with television?
Well,
you know, it does.
To that point, and then we should shut up and hear what they want to talk about, because you and I could just have a drink later.
I want to say, Elsa, my drink is coffee. Elsa Clench. Did you know her, by the way?
Yeah, she didn't like me.
Bill.
She
Bill
didn't
and
like me.
she didn't like
We
anybody.
were the
Elsa
competition.
Clench, one time I walked into CNN, there was a broom on the curb in the street.
That was
And I said,
Elsa's?
when did Elsa get a
Yeah.
party?
Elsa didn't like us because we were all a bunch of young women.
Oh, yeah.
She was very.
She didn't like the young men either.
And where is she now? Anyway, you asked me a
She only
question.
works on Halloween.
Oh, Bill.
And then the other thing was, and it made me think about it because you were talking about make the decision based on your passion.
Yeah.
Is, and you probably hear this a lot, but I actually believe this, is that don't be afraid of failure.
Oh no, you have to fail. I failed so many times.
Fail, take advantage of it. There are things that you learn from failure that you will not learn any other way. I have failed tremendously and then dragged myself out of it and learned something.
Well, if you're not failing, you're not trying new things.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think that's growth, right? Growth, I always make the analogy that what this business that we're in is like rocket science, because you got to throw stuff up. You do all your homework. You kind of rig it up to launch it the best way you know, within the boundaries of your reason and your education and your expertise. And sometimes the rocket goes up and sometimes it doesn't. We've all seen, recently Richard Branson has had some humbling experiences with his rockets, and but that's how they learn. That's
There's a joke in there somewhere.
That's how students.
Yeah, come on, yeah, because they're students.
But NASA. I have a friend who is a rocket scientist. NASA learns when they fail. They actually don't learn much when they don't fail. When you succeed, what is there to take apart? When you fail and you can analyze it, what did I do wrong? How can I do things better? And I'm constantly doing that. That's, I think, one reason I really like culture, because it's constantly iterating, it's constantly changing, and you have to stay up, because especially now, the minute something, we're no longer in a culture where it moves slow enough where you can lock something down and make it a formula. That's exactly when I talked earlier about things being generic. People don't want formulas. They want everything to be customized and personalized. But I want to go back to one thing you said, and then we really do have to take some questions. I think it's really important what you said is, even if you're in television or performing arts or whatever, keep your aperture, have the peripheral vision of things that are either just really interesting to you or just really interesting or related to your craft. So for example, my company and my experience has been 25 plus years, whatever, in the television business, but I've always had a great interest that I'm cultivating more in art, in travel, in fashion, in entertainment, music, whatever, pop culture. That's just personal, but what I realized is that the personal can be professional and vice versa. So as I look at where do I want my company to grow beyond television, I look at television. The reason I love television branding is because it is all about creating the expectation of an experience that is literally changing every minute in the case of media, right? Every time you turn on the TV, it's something different, right? And so what I like are brands that are experiences and not like a bottle of laundry detergent that is the same every time you use it. I like hospitality, I like fashion for that reason. I like art for that reason, that these things are constantly in a conversation that's changing and shifting. But also, if you think about the hospitality space and a brand that you're creating, which is exactly like we were talking about the 360 experience of a television brand today, which can be on multiple platforms. You know, if you check into a hotel, how you're greeted at the door, your check-in process, your bed, the room service, everything, you know, how well the remote works, how well the Wi-Fi works, that all feeds into your perception of the brand, right? So what I really decided is that the business I'm in that I really like is anybody who needs to capture an experience in a brand. And so that's what television is about. If you're making a show, you're also trying to capture some kind of thing that's above and beyond the value of just, you know, 30 minutes or whatever.
Well, the idea of having those multiple interests, whether it be art or whether it be music, those are all culturally based things as well.
So is television.
And so is television. So I think it just struck me, oh, I get it. I get it now.
Literature too.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can be an expert on television, but you'll be a much better expert on television if you're also very interested in other things and you bring those into your work and bring those practices and also compare and contrast across those different industries. How do, you know, what's innovative? How does innovation get created there? How does innovation get created there? What's, you know, who are some of the players? And some of the most famous people and successful business people in the world, you know, have these a myriad of interests, but their business is one thing. And so, you know, I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's ask them something.
Let me throw something at you
Sure.
real quick, and then we'll throw it out to these guys. Each of you define your, given today's technology and distribution and consumer consumption, what does television mean to you?
We had this conversation.
Yeah, that's a really big and good question. First of all, television means that I am experiencing and content on a screen of some kind. So it's not television. It's not a television set. It's maybe my laptop. It's maybe my phone. It's maybe my tablet. It may be a hologram. Who knows what it is? But it's content distributed and/or content that you have gone and gotten. So as opposed to it being distributed to you, you have decided that you want to go and get it, and then you have to somehow experience it. Today, our experience is on a screen. That's why there's the Consumer Electronics Show. But more and more, there will be other ways as we move forward. I envision the day when somebody implants a chip in my brain and I don't have to do anything except say, I want to watch True Detective, or I want to experience it, and then I'll be in the show. That's what I want to see happen someday. To me, it's not I would almost say let's come up with another word for it other than television. And I would challenge somebody to try and work on that. But we had this conversation last night too, and we decided actually, no, that's fine.
Well, I have a different POV, and this is, you know, I have a 19-year-old son, and he's at Santa Clara U, San Jose, studying business. And you know, he'll say, I'm going to watch TV, and then he'll take out his phone. So for him, television is just content. You know, I don't even think it's a metaphor. It's literal. He's saying, I'm watching television. Television is not this.
It's like
television
Kleenex.
Television is, you know,
Xerox.
Bites and yeah, it's a medium. It's not a piece of equipment.
It's an explainer more than it is anything else.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's throw it out here. Who's got the first?
What do you
question?
got? Roxanne, are you in here?
They all want to know how to get jobs.
yeah.
You know.
I guess my first question would be like, since you guys are like pioneers in culture, like how do you guys keep up with, you know, how to relate to culture and how to go ahead and like connect with your audience, like when you're branding your, like how do you come up with the designs and how do you come up with conceptualizing what's the ideal look for your brand and how do you connect that to your audience?
Do you want me to take that?
I have opinions, but okay. This is what she does. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've built a whole practice around it over the past 6 years, which is because I think just because of who I am and my upbringing, I was always really, you know how some people get colder earlier? I was always really sensitive to culture and shifts, and I didn't realize that not everybody saw things that way, and I started having issues where I talked to clients and it'd be like, I remember when I was feeling green, you know, going green was going to become really a big thing. You know, you guys probably all grown up in a world where green was, but there was a time when that was like very like radical hippie stuff. And I remember feeling, this is really going to become a big thing, and I was talking to a client and she didn't see it, and I got so frustrated because it was so obvious to me because of stuff I'd been reading and whatever. And I was right, because like the next year was the year that it blew up. But I think that what I found was that everybody experiences culture from a very personal point of view because of your upbringing, the town you grew up in, your tastes, your preferences. But you really need someone to look at, in the way that weather, right? It's like 41 degrees and sunny here, it's snowing in New York, it's probably warm in LA.
80 in Miami.
Yeah, don't rub it in. And, but we're all part of one ecosystem, to use my word, right? So you can have a personal experience that's completely valid to who you are, but you have to recognize that not everybody sees culture or experiences culture the same way. So we have analysts, to answer your question. I have people who are trained in how to study culture, and they're constantly looking at all mass media, so books, television, film, internet, magazines. They look at advertising, they look at promos, they look at social media, they look at physical environments like restaurants, retail. We did a study for Animal Planet. I don't know if you guys know the positioning for Animal Planet that we developed was resulted in the tagline, surprisingly human, which for Animal Planet was quite radical and counterintuitive, but that came from our finding looking at their shows that post-collapse, people really enjoyed watching and learning from animals because they taught us about our humanity. They because we actually, without animals, there's no such thing as human, that we define ourselves vis-a-vis animals. So understanding like deeper cultural meaning is really important to understanding how to be successful for a brand, for a TV show, for an idea, is that what are people thinking from a 30,000 foot level, so like the weather map from 30,000 feet, not individual POVs. And then, the question always for me when we deal with clients and brands is, who do you want to appeal to in that weather map, right? So the culture is this whole thing, but are you appealing to the people, metaphorically, now I'm talking metaphorically, in New York or LA. So for example, if we're doing a cultural analysis in a brand for, I don't know if you guys know Pivot or Fusion, these new millennial channels which we worked with, that's a very different cultural map than working with country music television, which we did, which is on the other end of the spectrum, and their world is completely different. So the most important thing for you all, whenever you're creating something, is think about who is your audience, really? Who do you want to, not who do you want to watch or who do you want to get, because that's a different question. The target, who do you need to get first? Think of it as like setting up your dominoes. Who's the first domino you got to get that will get everybody else to come, right? So who do you have to serve first? That's why the niche thing that I talked about this morning, a show that only has 100 viewers can ultimately be more successful these days culturally than a show that has 100 million, because if they're serving people in a very specific way, those people might get really excited and passionate and spread the word. It's a longer build for sure. It's not an instant open. But you're going to have much more loyal people because you're going to be literally speaking their language. So think about who is that person or those people, that culture or subculture you want to reach. And then what are they talking about? Like if you decide you want to do a film or something, like what are the things that are important to them? To Frank's point, not even about television, right? So when we looked at Animal Planet, we didn't just look at TV shows about animals. We looked at the whole, how are animals used in advertising? How are we treating them in pet stores? And at the time, post-collapse, people were putting as much money into their pet food as they were their own food, which is crazy because you would think the opposite. So really, really study the audience and you'll be more successful. But make sure it's true to you.
I have a little bit of a different approach because all the things that her staff does, I do. I spend a lot of my time just devouring stuff, whether it's travel, or it's books. I probably read 3 or 4 books a week. Because I'm traveling so much, I'll read a book on a plane, finish it by the time I get to one coast and read another one is on my way back. And there'll be all sorts of types of topics. Could be history, could be bios, could be action-adventure novels, who knows? But I try to travel as much as I can. I watch so much television, it drives everyone around me crazy, and I watch all different types of television. I really care about the news because I've spent so many years as a journalist. I want to see what's going on in the business, and what I see right now is deflating. We can talk about that in a few minutes too. So I try to personally touch and get as granular as I can in just about everything. I'm talking about fashion or the kinds of stuff I put in my house or the kinds of dishes that are in my cabinet. Absolutely all of that has something to do with who I am and how I approach doing what I do as an advertising executive, or as a consultant to a network, or even as a consultant to a company that sells hamburgers. So it's really a matter for me of trying to experience life every single second of every single day. I don't sleep much, but that may be a function of age. And I just think that if I had a staff to do that for me, I would expect them to come to me every day and just download all of it really fast.
That's what they
You know, and I don't, so I do it as much as I can. And quite honestly, I don't think I can do enough of it. There aren't enough hours in the day. But I'd never leave, honestly, I don't think a day goes by where I don't say at the end of the day, "God, it was a good day." I really, really believe that.
Can I, just not to plug, but if you're interested in how my analysts think, if you go to the website, we have a blog, and we also have an email list that you could, I think if you just email info@truthco.net, it's whatever's on the web. We can just say you want to be on the list, and you'll see every month we pick a show to know. So we pick a show only for its cultural relevance, not necessarily for its ratings, or sometimes it's a show that everyone's talking about, and we try to expose something that you don't know about why it's resonating. Sometimes we just pick a show that nobody's watching that we think people should pay attention to, so it's
Actually,
a good thing.
I read yours. I think I've watched at least 3 shows that you've said nobody's
I've
watching.
had a lot of people told us
Yeah.
that they started watching because they heard us talking about it. And again, they're not necessarily going to be the things that are big ratings drivers right now, but we think they're indicative of things that are going on in culture that are interesting and that people can learn on and develop off of. The next one that I think is coming out, I just looked at some copy this week, it's coming out probably next week, is we picked Empire as our new show to know. We do it monthly. And it's everything, it's scripted,
There's
reality,
no doubt, I would
comedy.
think that right away. There's the whole issue of the music on Empire and Diddy's Kid.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm going to do a
We
plug.
don't delve into that part.
I'll do a plug. So if you go to frankradice.com, my website is an aggregate of all the stories that I'm interested in. It is not a personal website. It is not promotional. It is just really interesting to me. And I'll get up in the morning at 5 o'clock, and I will have posted 8 things before 9. And they're all going to be interesting little tidbits. Amy Pascal, the president of Sony, just quit. You know the whole
She didn't
story,
quit.
or she didn't quit. She was asked to leave. Yeah, or whatever the words are these days. You know all about the Sony hack.
Spending time with their family.
That's right. Pursuing other opportunities. But it is. But it's, you know, you go on there and you'll see that I'll have stories like that. I'll have the Brian Williams story on there. It's just filled with that kind of stuff. And you can actually, up at the top, it's my homepage is a Rebel Mouse page, and you can sign up for a Rebel Mouse, my own newsletter, which will just send you every day the top 8 stories from my website. So that's sort of another thing that I do. I'm constantly reading online content all the time. I must have 8 or 9 other newsletters that come to me that are aggregates of other people's newsletters. And so I do that always, all day long. I probably spend 3 hours a day on social media, which is another thing. For someone my age, honestly,
That's unusual.
that's very unusual. I get that a lot because
But you don't have a drone.
I actually crashed the drone. I don't have one, but I have crashed one. I get that a lot. Actually, I actually had an issue with Fusion, where I had just finished working at NBC, and I had been in charge of marketing and promoting Conan O'Brien's Saturday Night Live and the Carson Daly Show. And I had left, and it had been about 3 years, and I had 4 years or so, and they asked me to come in and talk to them about Fusion. And I walked into the room, and the woman looked at me, and she said, "So what makes you think you can market to millennials?" Meeting was over. Except the second question was, "Why do you want this job?" And I said, "Because I like Miami." That really put a nail in the coffin. That was the end of it. But getting back to the serious thing, do as much as you can, read as much as you can, and take a look at both of our sites.
And others.
And others. Yes?
How does social media influence the content that is created nowadays for television?
Probably not enough. I think it's very, I mean, honestly, from a network standpoint, not from a necessarily, not necessarily from a YouTube standpoint. From a network standpoint, I think it's still seen as it's still kind of reactive. I would say, you know, Scandal and ABC have been more proactive. Jimmy Fallon, as we talked about, more proactive in using social media. Most people still use it as a gauge to see how the show is doing, and then to try to, you know, and I mean, the thing that's really interesting about social media, as you all know, it's self-policing, right? So you can have people who say something, and then the network doesn't have to do anything. The conversation, if it goes down a wrong path, people will correct it themselves. But the network's tendency is to try to control messaging. That's what has been 50 years of media, is control the message.
And that's the mistake.
And that's a mistake. And so most traditional media companies are using social media as a marketing tool, not really using it as a part of their experience. Some are better than others, but it tends to be more even show by show than even network by network, I think.
And there's a lot, well, at Definition 6, which happens to be an Atlanta-based advertising agency, we have a group of social media experts who spend a lot of time at an event that is televised, doing social media for that event. Example is, we do the social media for the NFL in London. So all the social media that comes out of that, aside from what the players and the people on the field and folks in the stadium are doing, they're actually overseeing. So that helps while the games are going on. But prior to that, they'll do a big social media campaign saying that, hey, they're coming, you know, the Seahawks are going to be playing the Vikings in Wembley tomorrow, and, you know, then the conversation begins. Marketing tool. Non-marketing tool is the kind of social media that's used in a show like The Voice. That actually helps The Voice, because that audience at The Voice is a
Helps the viewing experience.
helps the viewing experience. So there are two pretty good ways to use social media for traditional television. One is as a marketing tool, and one is as an experience aid.
Content enhancer or integral to the content. I agree with that. I also would say that what's really interesting about social media from a marketing standpoint, from an advertiser, like the big brands, like the Procter & Gamble's and whatever from the world. Actually, Oreo, Mondelez, the company that owns it, has been doing some of the most amazing social media, because they understand it's not about saying, hey, buy Oreos. It's about creating a brand experience that is a voice that people enjoy just as much as looking at your newsletter or hearing a comedian or whatever. So adding value is really important through social media, that you actually are, again, reaching out to people who are like-minded. I think we had a slide up before, so psychographics are the new demographics. It's really about, you want to reach media right now when there's so much choice. You know, I like to say the people who watch and love Breaking Bad probably have much less in common from a demographic standpoint than they do from a psychographic standpoint. They all probably, you know, they could be all across the board in terms of age, income, ethnicity, geography, education, but they probably all like edgy, adventurous stuff, right? So thinking about what's the mindset that and that's what brands do best, right? The people who love Apple are not, Apple was founded on a sensibility psychographic, which is there is a whole group of people who don't like ugly beige boxes. That was really their whole premise. It's not, you know, the secret of Apple is their brand positioning, their internal statement of differentiation is technology for the rest of us. It is about saying that there is a group of people that's disenfranchised by technology. And what has been done for years, and still is done, is that there are a lot of people who make like the highest end technology that science can allow. But a lot of times those things aren't delivered in a way that's consumer friendly or user friendly. And that's what happened. Apple's vision statement, their long-term goal, is to create the best loved technology on the planet. What's that not saying? It's not saying the best technology, right? So MP3 players, when they came out, were arguably higher technology. Engineers love them. But who still is playing their music on a Zune today, right? So, and it was great, but it just was hard to use. And the iPod, you know, which was great for people, consumers, humans to use, engineers dismissed. They're like, it's not, technology's no good. But guess what? We're all using iPhones and iPods and using iTunes. So, you know, it's not always about being the best, but really connecting with a mindset. That's what brands do well.
I will talk a little bit more about social media and branding. So you bring up Oreos. If you saw the Super Bowl, not this last one, but the one before, when the lights went out, right as soon as that happened, I think it was within 20 minutes, there was a tweet that their what they now called real-time marketing group put out that had a picture of an Oreo and a glass of milk, and it was in darkness, and it said, even in the dark, you can always dunk an Oreo. Huge, 20 million people within 15 minutes interacted with that ad. And everyone talked about it, and I will tell you, almost every advertising agency in America started a real-time marketing group. One of them is right here in Atlanta, and it's Coke. And they still haven't, because most of the others have gotten rid of it because they realized that they couldn't do it right. What real-time marketing is an assignment desk at a television station. And there's not a lot of difference. It is reacting, it is putting something out that will be, it's commenting and it's making it interesting and giving you something that you can react to. Coke did it very well when Prince George was born, and it was just a wonderful piece of interactive social commentary that they put out that also had millions and millions of interactions. So real-time marketing is something that the television networks are looking at as well as a promotional tool.
Well, and to add to that, I will say one thing that's really, first of all, I love millennials. I've been studying this generation, and I just really...
And then you have one.
And
personally.
I have one, but that's, I really, he's annoying, but, but I love him. I love him, but he's annoying. But, no, he's sweet. Sometimes. Sorry, that was, you just took me in another direction. But
I was thinking about the call last night.
Yeah, he called, he needed money. But just remember that when you call your parents. So sometimes they want to hear that you love them before I need the money. So.
And then they go, oh my God, he needs money.
No, he's calling me for money.
Just don't text for the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, Mom.
Yeah, he called at least. I was like, at least he called.
See,
he figured it out. But no, what I was going to say is I do love millennials because I really think that it's fascinating. I love change, so that's why I can embrace it. But you have to understand that your generation is the first generation in the history of human civilization that is simultaneously consuming content and media while you were evaluating it. That never happened before. That is a huge paradigm shift. If before you had to consume it, then somebody else usually evaluated, you read the review, and then you made your decision. Now it's happening real time. So that has implications and opportunities for you. If you know that there's the value of the real time is not that, is one, that you're able to respond to things as they happen, but secondly, so is everybody else. So if you remember that there's two things going on with social media, right? I'm reading it, and then I'm deciding, do I like this, do I not like this, do I want to make a witty remark, do I want to retweet this, do I want to favorite it, do I want to ignore it? That's a whole lot of stuff for 140 characters. Okay? But if you understand that that's the implication every time you put something up there, and of course you know that kind of intuitively, but if you really think about that as content creators, it opens up a lot of territory.
Yeah, and that gets back to the issue of the fact that there were 3 networks and now there are thousands of opportunities. And because I can tell you, nobody watched Hogan's Heroes and thought about it while they were watching it. Nor did they...
They don't even know what that is.
What was that guy's name? Bob, whatever his name is? If you had known...
Bob Crane.
If you had known what Bob Crane was doing
example.
while you were watching Hogan's
That's a bad
Heroes,
example for
it's
a
too
lot.
old.
Just
But
Google Bob Crane.
Yeah.
It's not pretty.
World War II, yes, there was a war. It ended in 45, but... Anyway, more questions? Yeah.
Good question. We were speaking earlier about artisanal lifestyles, trends, and I love talking about trends and forecasting things into the futures and millennials and how we consume media. And I was thinking about myself as a millennial, how I consume media on social networking, and like the issues I have with it. It's always the messenger, right? And we talk about Brian Williams and what he's going through now and working at CNN, you know, talking about the state of the industry is always often, you know, a topic of conversation and, you know, trying to analyze.
Which it wasn't up until about 5 or 6 years ago.
Exactly, right? So in that, I ask myself, why is this happening? And then I look at who's succeeding, and I look at something like Vice. And I say, why is Vice succeeding versus, say, like the standard practices? And then I say to myself, it's because Vice is putting themselves in the story, right? And then it's like you were saying earlier, how we want to get more personal, closer to the story, you know, get a more human
You don't
element.
want to filter.
And so I asked myself this question: does that mean now that there is room for long-form content for a group of people who were categorized as having short attention spans
Absolutely.
and being onto the next?
Well, first, can I just say, I hate it when people make the sweeping categorizations unless they're right. And there's a lot of sweeping categorizations around millennials, as you guys know, because you've probably been slammed more than you care. Everyone goes, yes. So, you know, some of them are on, and some of, like, the, you know, I always am fighting, I'm always myth-busting. People go, millennials don't like this, and they don't do that, and they won't do this. And usually it has nothing to do with millennials. It has to do with what's being offered to them. It's like, it was like when the CMO of that news network said, millennials won't watch news. It's like, well, they're not gonna watch your news, but they might watch news that is interesting to them and produced in a way that comes from their values and their sensibilities. So I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think it's the same thing with short form and long form. It's like nobody's gonna say, I will never watch long form. It's if you do it in a certain way where it's appealing and interesting. It's just like in reading, right? There's short bits and there's long form pieces that you can spend 3 hours reading, and it depends on what you want. So it's not an either or is what I always say.
I agree. I don't know. I totally agree. I don't think that that you can say that there's short attention span theater is all millennials. It's no. You go to a movie,
Right.
you'll watch 2 hours in a theater. You'll sit there and be a captive audience
Plus
to
they're all
that
on
because you're
Adderall,
interested.
so
Well,
there's no ADHD anymore.
anyway,
It's true.
they're what?
They're all on Ritalin and Adderall, so there's no ADHD anymore. It's all being medicated.
And
That's
question.
all cool. I'm not judging. I'm just saying this whole generation has
See,
had.
now you have just made a sweeping generalization. Are you all on Adderall? Who's on Adderall in here?
But I'm just
Excellent.
saying. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to look. I'm not trying to. No, but I want to be clear because I don't want to offend anybody because that would be.
Yeah,
bad.
because that's going to go
No,
out.
but here's the generational statement. This is a generation that has been very medicated. This is not I'm not judging. This is not subjective. This is statistically proven. And so, as much as people say, oh, they can't do this and they can't do that, it's like you can show evidence that, those things are being addressed. So I just feel like it's just silly.
And actually, I joke about it, but it is there. It exists. There's just no doubt about it.
It's human.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's human. So again, I don't think it's particularly millennial or whatever. And everything that everyone's saying about millennials and complaining, well, guess what? The boomers' parents complained about them too. I mean, our generation was the one that
What did
had
they say about
long
Elvis
hair
Presley?
and rock and roll and shaking their hips. They were like, So they were just as the boomers' parents were just as freaked out as
Yeah.
the boomers are about the millennials.
Yep.
The problem with the boomers, and I say this as one, is that every generation when they come to a certain age and dominance in the culture feels like it's the best and it has solved every problem. And millennials, as you age up, you're going to feel that way too. So it's just that's a cyclical thing.
Yeah, except you have way more toys.
Cooler ones.
Yeah, way cooler. Yeah.
In light of the Sony hack and the Charlie Hebdo stuff and all of that, have you noticed any sort of cultural shift within advertising and marketing within certain networks about the way that you address it? Do you sort of pretend it doesn't exist, or do you change your language
Go
based
ahead.
on it, or?
Go ahead.
So
It's a great question.
this actually makes me think a little bit about the issue that's going on in the news organizations right now about not showing the imagery from from not just Charlie Hebdo, but the recent assassination or the murder of the Jordanian pilot.
Yeah.
Now I should warn you that Fox is now showing it.
Of course they are. But
if-
can I? Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm gonna
But
get on
it makes me think about that because
I'm gonna get on it.
there are reasons not to show it. So what are the reasons that Fox used to show it? The answer to your question is yes, it is making people talk about it.
But
Yes,
in
it
a
is.
sensationalist way, or in a?
It depends on who it is that's actually going to enact that. But the thing is that because of what's going on, it is a topic of conversation, and it makes people think about whether or not they should react one way or another. That does not have anything to do with whether or not they reacted appropriately. It does have everything to do with the fact that the conversation is occurring.
Yeah, I just have I have a very strong point of view about it's not censorship with a big C, censorship with a small c, which is people saying we will show this, we won't show that. So, all those beheadings, which were horrific, I can't watch any of this stuff, but I know if I wanted to, in a minute, I could do it, right? And the guy in the ISIS guy, ugh. So, but what's really upsetting to me, actually, as an American, is that my government has decided that ever since the Iraq War started, I'm not allowed to see any coffins coming off planes. And there's far more of those than there are people being beheaded over there. So my point is, as Americans, the media has desensitized us to thinking that war is okay as long as we're fighting it, but if other people commit atrocities, that's bad. And I feel like I think we have a double standard, to your point. Like, I think we go, oh, well, we shouldn't let people see people being, you know, sensational video or whatever, but what we really don't want to see them to see is the truth about what's going on that we're doing. So I just feel like it's, you know, it's been through, it's not particularly this administration or the previous one, it has been about that control again. And I think what you're seeing right now that we're living through is the tension between an old era thinking it could control messaging and the digital world which says you cannot and expects you to not.
Well, I'm gonna ask Roxanne back
2 seconds
here.
before you run there, Frank.
Okay.
Social media, though, puts a lot of pressure on the news networks because the immediate
Yeah.
response
That's
is,
why they get so
we're not
far.
doing this. And they put out a blanket memo saying,
Right.
we're not gonna do this, we've taken a stand, we've made a decision.
Right.
Then they start getting pressure from social media,
That's
from
right. That's right.
from other platforms, from other places, from other people that are showing the video or doing sort of different versions of it. Like,
Pressure.
I think it was CNN showed a still, and it was the flames in the cage.
Right.
But they didn't show the video.
Right.
So it's kind of a
Well, that's where,
middle ground.
right, that's where social
But in the
media
end,
is.
the networks will cave and say, we will show you this, this, and this, and you can
If
visit
somebody
our
else is
website.
getting better ratings.
Yeah, go to
So
our website.
let me say
Great.
that the young lady who's speaking back there, Roxanne Garcia, is the former Northeast Bureau Chief for NBC News and the former Atlanta Bureau Chief for NBC News. So she knows of where she speaks about this, and I'm curious if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it's exactly what we were just talking about. It's the back and forth, you know, and there is, every news organization has a legal and standards group. And there are, I can speak to NBC News, there are 5 people that work in that group, and they basically make a decision about your language, what you can show, how you can show it, how much of it you can show. So
And that's across entertainment too, that's not just news, but
Right,
they
and
do
in
that across
our
everything
case,
they put out.
it goes for CNBC, for MSNBC, for the network news, for NBC, for Today Show Nightly News. However, when it comes to the .com platforms, then it sort of gets scurvy. Even though they still fall under the NBC News umbrella, there's a little more lax, they're just a little more lax when it comes to the digital platforms.
Or they just have more latitude.
And they have more space, exactly. But it's interesting to see how that dialogue happens and how the conversations happen. And there are all the people at the top are having conversations about what we can do and what we can't do. And in the end, you sort of, it trickles down. Maybe day 1 we don't do it, but by day 2.5, you'll see what you didn't see the first
Unless
day.
on day 1 somebody does do it, the ratings go through the roof, and on day 2, so do you guys.
Because then they're competing.
Now, yeah.
So I have a
Bill?
question.
No, just a question. If one of the other networks shows something that NBC says we won't show, a day later, does NBC say, well, we better show it? Is the competition showing?
What's interesting is the difference, how they differentiate between the nightly news broadcast and the Today Show. A lot of times, just within the news organization, the 2 shows will say, Today Show will say, well, it's relevant. We have to show it because we know GMA is going to do it, right? So there's that struggle, that internal struggle. But yes, to your point, we're not necessarily looking at what other people are doing. We're looking at the dialogue that's internal. Even so, it's a constant struggle about what to show and what not to show. And some people will turn around and say, it's newsworthy. We're doing this story because of this. So why wouldn't we show it?
Public's right to know.
I have a question. With all of you having extensive backgrounds in news media and dealing with these huge companies that are owned by conglomerates, do you think that big money has hurt journalism?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, it's big money, but I think it's the quest for ratings. I think it's ratings at the expense of journalism. We work with ABC News. I got really mad at them because they opened a 6:30 broadcast with David Muir with a small plane crash in like Omaha where 2 people died. And I'm like, okay, why is that news, right? If it had been in the New York Times, it would have been like a very small thing on page 15. But it was the opening video of ABC News that night. Okay, it's visual, it's fiery, it's scary, it's tragic, but as a viewer, there's nothing, it doesn't impact my life in any way. I have nothing, it's not about the safety of the plane, it's not, it's just sad, right? And so what the quest for ratings I was talking about, like Watch This or Die, there's no surprise that the majority of Americans in many, many studies will say the news is depressing. right? Well, that's because that has been what has gotten ratings. The news in the world is not depressing, right? It doesn't have to be. That was a choice. And again, so that's why you're seeing this rejection of traditional news, because there's only been one very particular way in terms of standards of journalism, how to deliver the news, and it's been ratings driven in terms of what's news. But now that we have the interweb, right, we can see, we become our own news directors, as we talked about CEO of content. So, I mean, how many of you cared or saw even about the small plane crash in Omaha with 2 people? Probably none of you, because it had no implication on the country or your lives. So it's not like, you know, when somebody lands on the Hudson and they saved, and that's like, okay, that's good to know somebody can do that. That was one good story, right? It's good to know a pilot can save people and a plane won't go down. But the rest of it's not really important.
It's funny, Bill, actually.
No, I'm sorry.
Are you going to talk about good news?
No, I'm finding this whole thing interesting.
Because CNN, Ted Turner said way back, I don't know, in the 70s, that we're going to do a show, we're going to call it Good News.
Oh, no, I did that show.
That's why I
I hated the name because it sounded like a religious show.
Good, and it was about exactly
Probably
what
nobody watched.
You know, nobody was watching CNN back then anyway, so.
Frank, just to let everybody know, at that time, Ted Turner, you all know Ted Turner.
Of course.
We had good news, nice people, and winners. 3 major shows that we put a ton of money in because he wanted to make everybody happy. And this was on TBS, but CNN was another story altogether. I raised my hand. I just want to know where we're talking network news. What about local news today with these guys?
Same,
Do you
yeah.
watch local news?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Does anybody watch local news?
No.
So what about, I mean, you know, what local news has become a sort of the place to go for weather and traffic.
By the way, there's a show that is on this week on a show on a channel called Pop, which used to be TVGN, called Schitt's Creek, literally. It's SCHITT apostrophe S. Oh, I'm sorry, that is another show. That's not the show I'm referring to. Back up. True TV, Breaking Greenville. It's about it's a reality show, but it's kind of shot mockumentary style. It's about 2 local news stations warring. The fact that a show like this exists shows you sort of how dated the concept of local news is in our culture. It's just not something seen relevant. It's, you know, it's great in a tragedy or in times of uncertainty or whatever to tune in and see what's going, snowstorms in New York and whatever. But everything that I was saying about the issues with traditional network news are exacerbated on the local level. So, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because it's increasingly television news as a genre, with the exception of non-traditional vehicles like Vice. Television news is just aging up and the audience is going down. So it's going to be like, I call it like AOL dial-up, which is like they keep feeding the people who need it, but then they're, you know, losing a business in the process.
You know, on NBC, for example, Meet the Press was one of the top 2 revenue-generating programs on the entire network, even at the time of Friends and when it was must-see TV. It was actually the real reason, because it was the budget for it was a guy in a desk, really. But that kind of news, a guy in a desk, which is not a lot different than The Tonight Show, which was the number 2 highest rated, revenue-generating show, because it was a guy in a desk. Those kinds of shows they're coming and they're going. Unless you reinvent them. Unless you reinvent them, like John Oliver and Jimmy Fallon, and someone like even Jon Stewart is, even Jon Stewart is starting to feel a little old to me.
Yeah.
In the sort of social media time, it was just a few years ago, 5, 6 years ago, something like that.
That's ancient history.
It is ancient history if you think about it in terms of social media history, but it was hugely flamed, and everyone caught it, especially the president of the news division, who threatened me with my job. And he said, "Where did you get that?" And I said, Wikipedia. And he said, "Really?"
Actually, that brings up an interesting point about talent and wiki and social media. So today, I don't know if you guys know this, but most network executives, when they're looking at new shows and they're looking at casting talent, want to see what their social media following is, which is as important as how talented they are.
Yeah, cloud score.
Yeah.
Cred.
So, yeah, so it's
Take
all
care.
about like, what's this person gonna bring, which, is good and bad. To me, if it's sort of, to me, it's like a trendy indicator as opposed to like a real indicator, but they wanna know what kind of built-in audience they have. So that's an interesting, was it something I said?
No, I'm gonna take
Oh,
a picture
okay.
of you.
Smile, everybody.
And then I'm.
So that's an interesting indicator if you're thinking about developing a project, and if you're just brainstorming or if you're really looking to cast somebody, think about like if I get someone who really has a social media following, what would that do? How would that help me get the word out? How would that, what does that tell me about that person? You have a whole history of their personality, their voice, and everything. So using social media as a tool for casting can be really good. It is also interesting, I was in a meeting the other day and we were talking about the credibility of some show or something, and one of my analysts said, and she's 29, she was like, well, they don't even have a wiki page about them. Like they don't count. So, there's just these interesting things that social media, not only as a communication tool, but as an analytical tool to gauge sort of the relative awareness of certain things, might be even more effective than a traditional focus group.
Got time for one more quick question.
Tweeting this.
This conversation is really interesting to me because I'm not a regular millennia kind of. I'm from Turkmenistan, which is just north of Iran, and I grew up with 3 black and white TV stations, just like you probably guys did, and I had the phone that I own.
Yeah.
And we didn't have internet when I was growing up, so coming and then I had a dream that I wanted to change that. I wanted to bring entertainment to Turkmenistan, but still to this day we have like 5 channels that are all government
I
controlled.
was going to say,
And
that's
they're like so afraid that someone's going to bring some kind of some
evil
content,
ideas. Yeah.
because they're seeing like what's happening in Ukraine, like the revolution and all that stuff. They're so afraid that media is going to bring that, so they're like, if I go back right now, they're probably going to put me in jail. But but coming,
He's not kidding.
and I'm not kidding. But it's interesting because I came here and seeing how the entertainment industry is, how it's so removed from the government here. But at the same time, like
Yes
you were
and
talking,
no.
but
Yes
at
and
the
no.
same time,
But you know what? Even at its worst,
It's
still
better.
great.
It's still
and
better.
It's better.
Much better.
Still better.
Even at its worst, look at. I honestly get up every single day and say, my God, people are paying me to do this. It's
right.
I feel really lucky to be a part of this industry in this country.
At this time.
At this time, especially, because I love the fact that it's all exploding. I think that's really great. I can't
It's
wait to
exciting.
see what's going to happen in 2 years or 3 years. Everybody talks about the trends being 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 years. I think the trends are a year or 2 years. I think everything is just is happening so quickly and so fantastic to be able to witness it and be a part of it. And you all are at the absolute leading edge of whatever new is going to come. And it's coming
You'll
from
be the
schools like this.
inventors.
Yeah.
And this is exciting for me because I came in and I started observing it, but also in 2012 I got to intern with Adult Swim Development Office.
That must have
Development.
been fun.
That must have been
So
crazy.
It was
What
incredible.
kind of drugs are they on
Oh,
there?
yeah.
I just want to know how you get
You know what?
how do you get to too many cooks? Is that Molly or ayahuasca?
I love that show.
Like
I
ayahuasca?
love
I'm
that
just
show so
trying to
much.
what is
First,
the
I-
drug
I-
that
I
was
think
consumed?
that everyone that does those transitions on that network are
That's
wrecked.
a great
The
network.
transitions are incredible.
they're
It's-
But the funny
But
thing
they
is
do
like just
tweets. They watch social media. There's
Yeah.
3 guys, 3 people, one's a woman, and they watch social media all week and try and figure out what's going on, and then they put those in.
So now they're using
So there's
social
this-
media to create content.
Which is the way it should be. It shouldn't just be, the media experience is not linear anymore. That's what I think traditional execs have a hard time understanding. It's like, it's simultaneous.
I'll tell you a funny story, and this happens a lot as an advertising executive. I get clients that ask for a viral campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Give me a viral campaign. What?
Well, I literally, this is the equivalent of that. So I literally have sat in countless meetings where top, really talented TV execs have said, all we need is one hit show. Like nobody's ever thought of that before. And like nobody's trying to make that one hit show. And it's like, we just haven't been thinking that. It's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Well, you know, actually, the truth is, it really only does take one hit show, and then all of a sudden everybody's
But you
happy.
don't
one
just
hit
say it.
But you don't say it. And it really does only take one great viral video to make something work.
But you don't just
But
say
you don't
it.
say, give me a viral
South
campaign.
Park
Yeah.
is a great example. South Park was, you know, of a show that just kind of blew up, right, in a viral way before social media. It was like that. The shows that are typically hit shows, the networks had no idea. MTV had no idea Jersey Shore was going to be big. We've analyzed the cultural reasons that Jersey Shore exploded. That was not why they put that on the air. So, you know, all of that is to say, if you really believe and you feel strongly about something and you do your homework, you know, you can't manufacture a hit. But if you can manufacture something you're really proud of, that's the first win.
Cool.
I think that's a good end note.
Yeah.
That's a very good
Thank you
I
all
can't
very
top
much
that.
for your
Other than my
time.
2 Adult Swim shows. So with that, let's thank our panel, or especially. Feel free to tag it, catch them later tonight, join the networking, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks.
Thank you.